Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull. In today's video, we'll be talking about the way that college football is changing very rapidly. Starting off with the Army All-American Bowl will now be accepting juniors to play in their bowl game. And this is a big deal because they typically only invite about 100 players to come and play in this game. Now, we all know that this is a showcase for seniors typically, but now that juniors are being added, I mean, it's a good thing for the juniors to be able to showcase their skills versus some upperclassmen, but at the same time, we're taking away slots from these seniors. And I just don't think that it makes a whole lot of sense to be adding juniors into this bowl game. Why not just do a separate bowl game for each class? One for the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and then for the seniors, because these guys are trying to get their stock up. You know, they're trying to get their rankings up, and they're also trying to prove how good of a player they are on a national scale. So I think that, you know, these camps, these combines, these all-star games are going to start moving more towards what the Senior Bowl is for, college players going on to the NFL. And what the NFL Combine is, where we can see some college coaches actually being there in person and where it's a much, much bigger deal. So that's something that I definitely think is going to be changing moving forward. Now, on to the news of the day. Laura A. Sachs, a regional director for the National Labor Relations Board, says that Dartmouth's basketball players are employees of the school and they can unionize. All right, now we just said last week that the unions are coming, and I do think that this is just the first step in what's going to end up being like a national union for all of college sports. But number one, for Tennessee, this is a big deal because we've got the big court case coming up February the 13th, and it seems like the temperature across the country is that these college student athletes are actually employees, and I think that that's going to bode very well for us, and we will end up seeing the NIL and transfer portal rules temporarily lifted, I think, after the 13th. All right, so moving forward, I do think that every institution across the country will have some sort of a union for the student athletes. The leaders of those unions will meet on a national scale to talk about the issues that are important to student athletes at the time. They'll then, take a vote on the most important issues based off of the sport and take it to the individual boards, because I do think that there's going to be different boards for different sports, on different levels. So number one, okay, just talking about college football, major college football, the type of football that Tennessee plays in. We know that Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti have come together and they said, hey, look, we are all for student athlete feedback. So I think that there'll be a whole separate, board for that level of college football, and then so on and so forth down to the lower tiers, and then different for different sports. There could, maybe ultimately end up being a really big board that represents a large portion of college sports. But again, I think that the Power 2 conferences are going to be taking over major college football as we know it. All right, so some of the things that I do see coming that's going to change college football as we know it is, number one, we talk about the NCAA moving slow whenever it comes to implementing different rules and change and things like that. I think that it could go a little bit slower, especially whenever you're talking about major college football, because these are young student athletes that will, more or less be representing themselves. Maybe they could go out and hire some type of legal counsel. I don't know how all that's going to look, but whenever you're talking about them fighting for what they find important, we all know when you're young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you're more willing to kind of fight harder for what you really believe in versus if you're a little bit older, you got a family, you got to worry about getting those bills paid. These kids, most of them anyway, they don't have any of that. So I think that they'll probably take it a little bit further in the, fighting aspect of this whole thing. If it ever comes down to that, and I'm sure at some point they're going to disagree with that big board of the Power 2 conferences, and they're going to end up bumping heads. Will we see some strikes coming? I don't know, but that's probably going to happen at some point. But I think that things will take a little bit longer to get changed. All right, so next thing that I could see changing is a salary of some sort being implemented. That's definitely coming. Now, we know that the leaders of the two power conferences don't really like the whole salary thing, the way that it was written up, as that Project D1, but there will have to be some sort of a salary. I think the NIL will essentially still be NIL, because I don't know if you can really put a cap on someone's name, image, and likeness. I'm not a lawyer again, but I don't think that you can do that. So I think that that's still going to kind of be a free for all. But as far as the salary, I think that these, young student athletes will come together and vote on some sort of minimums and maximums based off of class. Is what we see in the NFL. There's a rookie league minimum, and then there's like a veteran league minimum as well. Obviously, the leaders of the student athlete, unions are going to be upperclassmen. So they're probably going to throw some things in there that make more sense for them, that kind of benefits them more. But I will say this, I do kind of side with them with that, because I think that it just makes sense. It's only fair. I don't feel like a unproven true freshman should necessarily be making more than an upperclassman that's been here for so long and that's been proven. So I think that that's something that we could see very early on once this whole thing turns into whatever the heck is going to turn into. I would say probably within the next couple of years. All right, now something else that I can see changing is a limit to the amount of players that a school can take in the transfer portal. This is something that high school coaches and parents have been very vocal about. 3-star and lower types of guys aren't getting nearly as many opportunities as they used to because college coaches are going straight to the transfer portal and they're getting more proven players. So I think that that would be extremely beneficial for the high school student athletes that are looking to go on to college because, again, they'll get more opportunities. And I also think that for the players that still end up, kind of going to the second tier outside of the Power 2 conferences, they're essentially going to be like a breeding ground to get to, I guess essentially what would be considered the minor leagues of football, okay, of professional football, which is what the Power 2 conferences are going to end up being. So I think that those, again, are very, very necessary. And I hope that that's a change that comes very quickly. All right, so the last thing that we'll talk about in this video that I could see changing early on is either a reduction or an increase in the amount of hours that student athletes are allowed to spend on their sports. Now, with the NCAA, I believe it's currently at like 20 hours. So I don't know if the student athletes would want to reduce that. I mean, they probably would want to, but I don't know if that would really make sense. If I was them, I would fight a lot harder to try to enforce a very stern 20 hours if that's what it ends up being. Because I can tell you from playing college ball that it's a lot more than 20 hours that you are going to be investing with your team. It's probably closer to about 50, maybe 70 hours. Okay, it's going to vary from school to school, sport to sport, so on and so forth. That's something that will definitely get brought up early on in this process. And again, I think that it's probably going to happen after the end of the contract with the 12-team playoffs, which is in 2026. I think we start an entire new deal. And that's when I believe that we'll see these things implemented, for major college football. So those are my thoughts on it. And I would absolutely love to hear y'all's. What do you think I missed here? Is there anything that y'all would like to add? Please add it down in the comments section. I think it's a great conversation for us to have because, again, everything's about to be changing very, very rapidly. But that's it for this video. Thank y'all so much for staying all the way to the end. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. And we'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.